Listen up, beautiful people. I want to take just a minute to tell you about our new hosting site, Anchor. Anchor is your one stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. So go to anchor.fm/start and become part of the Anchor community today. And now, back to the show.
Well, it's another game at home at AutoZone Park for Memphis 901 FC and another game of more of the same. Hello, everybody. I'm Lawrence Dockery, and I'll be recapping Saturday night's game against the Charleston Battery for you here on the 901 Soccer Podcast. We're going to be talking about the chances that went awry for our beloved boys in blue. We're going to talk about the struggles in front of goal, especially at home. And we're going to, towards the end of the segment, we're going to take a peek at the next game for Memphis 901 FC as they travel on the road to take on the two-time defending USL champions, Louisville City. So, like I said a second ago, it was more of the same for Memphis 901 FC. They looked like the better team over the course of 90 minutes, but for some reason that really nobody can figure out, they still could not find a way to put the ball into the back of the net. And they ended up coming away with a 1-0 loss to the Charleston Battery on a goal in stoppage time. And to me, this is actually starting to become something of a disturbing trend, as in several of the previous home games, Memphis has been the better team and then conceded in stoppage time either right before the half or, like this past Saturday, right before the end of the game. However, the game against Charleston appeared to be a flipping of the script on some level, as Saturday night's game was the first game all season where Memphis did not concede a goal in the first half, though once again they did fail to score in the first half, and that means that throughout all four home games this year they have failed to score in the first half. But they did have several golden opportunities that they failed to put away in the first 45 minutes. The most notable one coming when Elliot Collier headed the ball off the post off a corner kick just before halftime. I think it was probably something like the 41st minute or somewhere about in there. And the second half was actually quite similar to the first. Memphis had every chance in the world to score, and just for whatever reason, they couldn't do it. And this is something that I've wondered about. This is something that I'm sure Coach Mulqueen and the players have wondered about. I'm sure this is something that the members of the Bluff City Mafia have wondered about, and nobody can quite put their finger on why Memphis can't score goals despite getting chance after chance after chance. Right before the end of the game on Saturday, there was probably about a 5-minute stretch, and I'd say maybe the 80th minute, where Memphis had a succession of probably about 5 or 6 corner kicks, and at least one of them should have gone in. First off, you had Elliot Collier was on his back on the ground, and he nearly put it in, but he ended up forcing a save out of Kaminsky in the Charleston goal. Then probably the next corner right after that, it came in, and I'm sure everybody remembers this. It hit the underside of the crossbar and bounced down on the goal line, but somehow stayed out. I'm sure there were a lot of fans at AutoZone Park that weren't happy that a goal wasn't given, but then you look at the replay, it didn't go in. The assistant referee was right on the goal line by the corner flag, and he didn't signal that it went in, so that's what we're going to roll with. And right after that, Memphis had 2 or 3 more corners, but none of them were as close as those first 2. And then, of course, stoppage time happened, and Charleston scored with basically what was the last kick of the game. It did come from some great work down the right-hand side of the field from Charleston. Cross came in, and Jeff Caldwell made a spectacular save on the initial shot. Unfortunately, the rebound he gave up was too big, and it was Charleston's substitute, I believe it was Dante Marini, who tapped it in to secure all 3 points for the Battery. And personally, as a referee, putting aside my fandom and love for the boys in blue here, as a referee, Charleston Battery were just such an annoyance. And there were maybe 3 or 4 times where there should have been a couple of cautions issued to the Battery that wouldn't. I'm not really sure why. I'm a big believer as a referee, and if you clamp down on the little stuff early on, big stuff doesn't become big stuff. Like, for example, every single time, and if you can go back and scroll through the 901 Soccer Podcast Twitter feed on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod and take a look, and I said as much that there were a number of times where the Battery got called for a foul, and 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 of their players would all throw their arms up and start crying to the referee that it wasn't a foul. Well, here's a news flash for you, Charleston Battery. Believe it or not, referees are not out there calling fouls for no reason. 99 times out of 100, when a referee calls a foul, it's because there was a foul. I know that's shocking, right? And then Memphis got called for fouls, which were fouls, and the Charleston Battery players were still complaining about it. There was one time, I believe it was Arthur. I keep wanting to say Bosa because, we're right here after the NFL draft, and one of the Bosa brothers was just recently picked in the NFL draft, but I believe it was Arthur Bosua. It's spelled Bosua, however you pronounce that. If you have a different way, I'll let you take it from there. But I'd have booked him for dissent on several different occasions. There was one time where Jeff Caldwell made a great save, and he kept it in right on the goal line, but Bosua for Charleston thought it should have been out for a corner kick and had more than a number of words for the assistant referee on that side, and the assistant referee was just like, dude, get out of my face. And then Bosua, probably 2 minutes after that, got called for offside, and again, started popping off at the assistant referee. Now, if I was the AR on that game, I'd have brought the center over and said, hey, man, I'm tired of dealing with this. Give this guy a yellow card. But that didn't happen. Charleston scored a last-minute winner. They get out with a 1-0 win. They get out all 3 points. So what does this mean for Memphis 901 FC? At home on the season, this means they drop to 0-3-1. That's 0 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. They've still scored just 1 goal at AutoZone Park, but it's not like the chances haven't been there. It sounds cliched to say that bad luck might be involved, but that has been the case on a number of these opportunities, whether it's something off the post or an otherworldly save from a goalkeeper. But on the flip side, once you get to a certain point, it's on Memphis to create their own luck and put at least one of these opportunities away. Because we're 4 home games into the season and 8 games so far on the year. They've only won once. They have 1 win in 8 games, and if that's when that's the case, it's got to be something more than just bad luck. They've been shut out in 3 straight games: 1-0 against Atlanta United 2-0 against Nashville, and then 1-0 on Saturday against the Charleston Battery. Goal scoring's a problem, folks. That's just a problem, and I don't think at this point there's the excuses, and Coach Mulqueen is well aware of this, and he said as much in some of his post-game press conferences that cohesiveness early in the season, looking for chemistry, and maybe some players just aren't understanding each other, that's all gone now. And obviously there's some injuries to some players in the preseason that were counted on, that were going to be guys that make us click offensively. They're going to be banging in 9, 10, 11, 12 goals a season. Injuries happen, but at some point, 1 goal in 4 home games is a problem. And Coach McQueen's aware of that, and he's not happy about it. And there's really, as far as I know, there's nobody suggesting that he is. But in his post-game press conference this past Saturday against Charleston, he said it goes a little bit deeper than just goal scoring. He said that there's such a level of desperation to score a goal that it's caused them to be lacking defensively in terms of discipline. And what that means, they're pressing so hard for a goal that they don't keep their shape. The other team counters and bangs in a goal right before the end of the game, as we saw happen against Charleston. So now we got to turn our attention forward to the next game, and unfortunately it does not appear to get any easier, as our beloved boys in blue have to go on the road to the 2-time defending USL champions, Louisville City, who are coached by none other than John Hackworth, the father of Memphis 901 FC player Morgan Hackworth. Not only has Louisville won the last 2 USL titles, but last year they were the last non-MLS team standing in the U.S. Open Cup. I believe they got all the way to the quarterfinals of that tournament. However, this year, so far, they are only 3 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. They've also had issues scoring goals. Although there's only been 1 game where they failed to score at all, which I believe was against the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. I'd have to go double-check that. If I'm wrong, let me know, but if I'm not, that's fine. Another problem facing Memphis for this particular game next week is that Louisville is going to be very well rested when Memphis comes rolling into Louisville. Their last game was on April the 20th, so they're going to have probably 10, 11 days off before Memphis comes to town, whereas Memphis is only going to have about 3 or 4. One thing that personally I'm hoping for out of this game is that other than a few goals for Memphis, which I'm sure I'm not the only one hoping for that, is that I hope that this game blossoms into a fantastic rivalry type series. The way that Memphis and Louisville used to be rivals in basketball back in the day, you want to think about Denny Crum versus Dana Kirk, or even Rick Pitino versus John Calipari. Those were fantastic rivalries, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that the universities were similar and the cities are very similar. And I think that could continue to be the case if we extend that to soccer for Memphis 901 FC versus Louisville City. Because as much as Memphis fans want Nashville to be the big rival, Nashville's going to MLS next year, so this year's probably going to be the only year where you get to play against Nashville with anything approaching regularity. Louisville's opening up a new soccer stadium next year, but they're staying in the USL. So in terms of rivalry, Memphis-Louisville, I think, should be the focus for the folks in the Bluff City Mafia and Memphis fans at large. But in terms of on-field play, Memphis, they just got to start scoring goals. There's that saying in Memphis, and I'm sure everybody's aware of it, Memphis will always support a winner. The support through the first four home games of the year has been fantastic. This past Saturday against Charleston was the second largest home crowd of the year. I believe it was 78,000 and change. 7,800 and change. 7,800 and maybe 71. You'd have to scroll through the 901 Soccer Podcast Twitter feed. I know I put it up there. I don't have that in front of me right at this moment. But tough game coming up next week against Louisville. That's going to be a litmus test, I would say. And that's something I asked some of the players about in the post-game press conference on Saturday. I said, after such a devastating result where you thought you're at least good enough to get a point, how do you go on the road several days later to what has been the standard bearer for the USL the last several years? How do you go there and get a result? And the players just said, look, we're professionals. We got to do what we do. We got to get in, have a couple good days of training, and then just show up and play our game. And that sounds cliched, but the reason cliches are cliches is because more often than not, they work. And Memphis, the chances are there. They just got to put them away, and they got to figure out how to start doing that before the season kind of goes off the rails and gets out of hand. All right, so that'll wrap it up for us here today on this brief recap here on the 901 Soccer Podcast. Again, I'm Lawrence Dockery. You can find me on Twitter at LDoc93. You can find the 901 Soccer Podcast on Twitter at 901 Soccer Pod. And I know there's several members of the Bluff City Mafia going to be making that trip to Louisville next week. Y'all go and do us proud, represent, and we hope you cheer the boys in blue on to a victory and 3 points.
We are a part of the Beautiful Game Network. Go to bgn.fm to discover soccer podcasts from across this great nation of ours.